his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated.
Grace and peace to you from God our Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. This week we begin a journey through Scripture using the narrative lectionary, which means that the lectionary from now through May will take us through the scope of Scripture from Genesis to Revelation. And as you heard, the beautiful creation story from Genesis 2, I invite you to think about and reflect on this gift of creation as we watch together this video.
Of the past half century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And a classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, but the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately, those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. The valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs, and the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more little sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transform not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
There's a beautiful quote attributed to naturalist John Muir, which says this: "When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in creation." I don't know about you, but I would never have imagined that wolves can change the course of rivers. But apparently they do. To lose a wolf means to lose other things, other life. And to gain a wolf is to give life and to stabilize land. I don't know how that struck you, but I find that whole story compelling and just overwhelmingly awesome. God has put this creation around us, astounded us with this creation and how all things are connected to each other. You know, we realize we're connected to each other through the little stories we experience, right? As when we find out that our doctor's first cousin went to the same college we did, and when we talk a little bit further, we find out that we actually dated our doctor's cousin's older brother who went to the same college as well. And what do we say about that? Small world, right? And then we begin to realize that maybe this theory of 6 degrees of separation, that we may actually be connected in some way to every other person on earth with 6 or under acquaintance links. And we call it coincidence, or we call it small world. The creation story would call it God. God, the Creator, who from the very beginning linked us all together in one amazing, unfolding, interconnected, independent, communal creation. We may recognize it or be reminded of it because of those small world experiences. But the creation story is the one that tells us first that we are connected. God has this intention built right in, that we are connected, that man is in need of partners, that creation is the necessary intermingling of streams and ground, plants and rain, into which humanity is placed. That human beings have a place in this creation to care for it, which of course is stewardship, right? But so much more than stewardship of money, the stewardship of creation, of the environment, and of one another. If a wolf's life affects an ecosystem, how much more do our lives affect the world? Almost every day during the week when I ride home at the end of the day, I turn on TMJ. I get the traffic report to see if I need to avoid particular areas. But I always, in the course of that, then hear the stock market report. And it tells me that the stock market went up or that it went down. But then there's always a comment with that, right? And it will say something like, stock market numbers changed today amid news out of, right, and often it's China or Greece, or impacted by something so very far away from us geographically. But it's that reminder that our lives are intertwined with people around the world but our lives are intermingled. We are all part of the same story. You know, when Jesus approaches those disciples about to be disciples, and he says to them, "Follow me," he is saying, you are in this with me. He's saying that the work of God is collaboration, of helpers helping, of community gathering, of children of God united in the work of the kingdom. This is not solitary work that we do. Being a Christian is not a solitary identity. And it all starts right here in the creation story. All a part of one creation, fashioned and made with love and intentional connections. Now I find that truth to be both humbling and empowering. The truth that we are connected is humbling because it means that I cannot live under the myth that I am the captain of my own ship, the creator of my own fate. I cannot pretend that what I do doesn't affect others. I cannot pretend that I am not accountable. It means that the individuality and the individualism that often permeates our sense of being, the individualism is not of God. What I do does affect others for better or worse, and what happens to them impacts me. And that's humbling because I would rather think it's all up to me and that it's all about me. Life's much better, right? No, not so much. And so that means in a very humbling way that when there is tragedy, when there is struggle around the world, it will affect me. I can read it from afar, I can hear about it, but it impacts me through the ecosystem of God's creation. And it means that I can't shrug off what I hear about and what I see, nor can others shrug off what happens to me. And God calls us into that sense of understanding when God calls us in the scriptures to bear one another's burdens, right? To be there for each other. It's humbling. And maybe it reminds me when I want to make it all about me. But at the same time, this truth of our connections is empowering. It's that good news, that grace, that we are connected and that your life and mine is of significance. That we do make a difference and that God is there. It's the grace and good news of realizing that there is God-intended purpose for each of us woven into creation. Think about what each day of your life might be if you woke up saying that to yourself. If you woke up each day and before you put your feet on the floor, you said, there is God-intended purpose for my life today woven into creation. We might never get out of bed if we thought that every day, right? That'd be too overwhelming. It's the truth. That's what ought to put our feet on the floor. That woven into creation, God has God-intended purpose for you and for me, and what we do matters. And then it's grace and good news. It's also good news because that means God intentionally put into place systems to support me and to you, to strengthen me and you, to bless me and you, for our good. I'm not alone. Nor are you. You know, when we work together for our good, taking part in the ecosystem in which we live, then we are reflecting God's intention. And when we don't, I think that's when we suffer and struggle the most. As we begin this journey in the Bible, we find that our core story here that sets us up for everything else is this story of creation. The core story that points us to God as the one who has set life before us with connection and purpose. Like the wolves of Yellowstone, our presence not only makes a difference, but is actually a part of bringing life to all that is around us. So let us take our places. Let us raise our voices. Let us offer all that we are and all that we have been created to be, to give and to receive, all to the glory of God and to the blessing of God's amazing and